Everything fell apart faster than I could understand, and no one told me why. I'm David. I'm 44 years old now, and I've built a good life, something I'm proud of. But to truly understand who I am today, you need to know where I came from and how betrayal shaped every part of me. I was once married to my childhood sweetheart, Linda. We met back in middle school, the kind of innocent love that starts with passing notes and stolen glances. Everyone around us thought we were meant to be. And honestly, so did I. We stayed together through high school and college. I proposed to her the same week we both landed our first full-time jobs. It felt right. It felt like the next step in a life we were building together. So at 22, I became a husband. The first couple of years were good, maybe not perfect, but we were figuring things out. We were young, and we had dreams. I was working long hours at a marketing firm, trying to climb the ladder, while Linda worked at a local clinic. We still found time for date nights, weekend getaways, and late-night talks about our future family. I truly thought we were solid. But around our third year, things started to shift. At first, it was subtle. Linda became distant. She stopped asking about my day. She barely touched me anymore. I chalked it up to stress. Maybe she was tired from work. Maybe we both were. I tried everything to bring the spark back, planned surprise dinners, left little notes in her purse, even booked a weekend retreat. But nothing worked. Then, 3 weeks before our third anniversary, she handed me an envelope. Inside, divorce papers. No explanation. No tears. No emotion at all. I remember standing in our kitchen, still in my work clothes, staring at her while she sipped tea like she had just reminded me to take out the trash. I asked her, over and over, why? All she could say was, I'm not in love with you anymore. That was it. I begged her to reconsider. I told her we could fix it. Therapy, space, time, whatever she needed. But her heart had clearly left long before the words did. The divorce was cold, fast, and surgical. We didn't have kids, barely any shared assets, and she had already found a new apartment. I never saw her again after signing the final papers. That alone should have broken me, but the real pain came after. Within weeks of the divorce, my family, my own blood, cut all contact with me. At first, it was subtle. My texts went unanswered. Calls straight to voicemail. I thought maybe they were giving me space. But then my mother blocked my number. My sister ignored me when I showed up at her apartment. My father opened the door once, looked me in the eye, and shut it without saying a single word. I was stunned, lost, abandoned. I hadn't done anything wrong. I was the one left behind. So why were they the ones turning their backs on me? I tried everything to reconnect. Emails, letters, even drove 2 hours to my parents' house one weekend, only to sit outside in my car for an hour, watching the lights flicker on and off while no one opened the door. I felt like a ghost, someone who had once existed in their lives but was now invisible. To make things worse, whispers started surfacing from mutual acquaintances, vague comments like, there's more to the story, or maybe your family's just protecting someone. No one ever said it outright, but I could feel it. I knew something wasn't right. That silence, those missing pieces, haunted me for years. With no closure, I spiraled. I quit my job, stopped leaving the house. I let the world pass me by while I sat in the wreckage of a life I thought I understood. Depression took root like rot in a tree, quiet, slow, but consuming everything. I would have drowned in that darkness completely, if it weren't for a few close friends who refused to let me go under. They pulled me back, slowly, encouraged me to take control again. And that's when I decided, if my past was gone, I'd build something new. But at that time, I had no idea that what had been taken from me wasn't just a marriage or a family. I had lost something far greater, something that had been hidden from me all along. And the people who were supposed to love me most? They were the ones who kept it secret. After the divorce and my family's abandonment, I became a ghost in my own life. I spent months doing nothing. I didn't shave, barely ate, and didn't speak unless someone spoke to me first, which wasn't often. My apartment was dark most of the time, curtains drawn, the air stale and thick with silence. I would sit on the edge of my bed for hours, staring at the floor, trying to make sense of how everything I had built, my marriage, my future, my family, had vanished overnight. People talk about heartbreak like it's a metaphor, but I could physically feel it. In my chest, in my gut. It was like I'd swallowed glass. There were days I didn't want to wake up. And when I did, I wished I hadn't. But a few friends refused to give up on me. Chris, my college roommate, started coming by every morning just to get me out of bed. Natalie, a friend from work, brought me meals, and made me walk with her in the park like I was some lost dog she found and couldn't leave behind. They reminded me, over and over, that I still had value, that I still had a life to live. At first, I didn't believe them, but I wanted to. And eventually, I started to. Somewhere in the middle of all that pain, a thought began to form. A dream I had pushed aside for years because of Linda, because of life, because of fear. I had always wanted to open my own restaurant. Back when I was married, I used to talk about it all the time. Linda would roll her eyes and tell me we needed stability, and I'd nod and go back to work like a good husband. But now, there was no one to tell me no. So I started small. Sketches on napkins, recipe ideas in old journals, late nights researching local permits and food safety laws. I poured all my pain into the planning, like if I could just build something from scratch, I could reclaim some control over my life. The hardest part was money. I had savings, but not nearly enough to open a restaurant. That's when Chris stepped in again. He connected me with a couple of small investors he knew from his own business circles. Natalie helped me write the pitch and presentation. For the first time in years, I felt like I was moving forward. I decided to name the restaurant Maple and Ash. It was a name my father once suggested during a family dinner, back when we used to dream together. Back when we were still a family. I almost didn't use it, but in some twisted way, it felt right. Like I was reclaiming a piece of what they took from me. It took a year of planning and another year of struggling to get the doors open. The grand opening was small, just a few dozen people, but I remember standing in the kitchen that night, watching the tables fill up, the hum of conversation, the clink of silverware, the smell of garlic and rosemary in the air, and I felt something again. Pride. Purpose. Peace. That first year was hard. I worked 16-hour days, 7 days a week. I did everything: cooking, bookkeeping, managing staff, fixing broken pipes, even scrubbing the floors at night. But slowly, people started noticing. Local food blogs wrote about us. Customers came back. Word spread. Then, one night, everything changed. There was a charity gala in town, hosted by some high-profile business owners. One of my regulars, an older gentleman who loved our mushroom risotto, invited me to cater the event. I was exhausted, running on fumes, but I said yes. And that's where I met Emily. She was radiant. Warm smile, quick wit, the kind of woman who saw through the noise and straight into your soul. She told me she loved the food. I told her she should try the dessert. She laughed and said only if I joined her. That was our first date, right there, standing near the buffet line, sharing tiramisu out of a plastic cup. I didn't expect to fall in love again. But Emily made it easy. We took things slow. She knew I was still healing. She never pushed. She listened. And before I knew it, 3 years had passed. We had built something beautiful, solid, real, and rooted in mutual respect. Eventually, I proposed. She said yes. Now, a decade later, we have a son. He's 8, curious about everything, and has her smile. We build a life I never thought I'd have again, a real home, laughter, joy. As for the business, it didn't stop with one restaurant. The success of Maple and Ash snowballed into something bigger. With Emily's support and the continued help of loyal friends and mentors, I launched a hospitality company. We now own a chain of restaurants and boutique hotels across the region, and we're still growing. For the first time in my life, I was standing on solid ground. Happy. Fulfilled. But success has a way of drawing shadows from the past. And I had no idea that a simple interview, meant to celebrate my journey, would rip open the wounds I thought had healed. Because that's when they came back. After 20 years of silence, my family showed up at my door. And they brought the truth with them. It happened on a Wednesday. I remember because I had just finished a conference call with one of our hotel partners, and I was grabbing a quick cup of coffee before diving into the next round of meetings. The office was quiet, just the usual hum of computers and soft chatter. Nothing felt out of place until my receptionist buzzed through. "David," she said, hesitating. Your family is here." My heart stopped. For a moment, I thought she meant Emily and our son. Maybe there was an emergency, but something in her voice didn't sound right. I asked, "Emily and Alex?" She replied, "No, your parents. And your sister." My blood ran cold. It had been 20 years. 2 decades since I'd heard their voices, seen their faces, or even read a birthday card from them. They had ghosted me like I never existed, and now, just days after my interview aired on TV, they were standing in the lobby of my company, uninvited. I told her to ask them to leave. I wasn't ready. I didn't want to see them. But of course, they refused. They made a scene, loud enough that I could hear the commotion from upstairs. I couldn't have security throw out my own family, not in front of my employees. So I took a deep breath and walked to the lobby. And there they were. My father, who once slammed the door in my face. My mother, who used to sing to me when I was sick. And my sister, who I hadn't seen since I stood alone at the courthouse, signing divorce papers. All of them smiling, as if no time had passed, as if nothing had happened. "David," my mother said, like she was greeting me after a long vacation. "You look wonderful." They hugged me, without asking, without hesitation. I stood there stiff, frozen, confused. My body was present, but my mind was screaming. They started complimenting me right away. How proud they were. How inspiring my story was. How honored they felt to see me succeed. My sister even joked that I'd always been the ambitious one. I wanted to scream. They spoke as if we had brunch last week, as if they hadn't erased me for 20 years. I nodded, said as little as possible, and told them I was in the middle of work. But then they asked about Emily, about my son. They had seen pictures during the interview and wanted to meet the family. That's when I snapped. I looked my father in the eye and said, "Why now? Why today? After everything?" His smile faltered, but he didn't answer. None of them did. Instead, they shifted the blame to me. Said I should have tried harder to reach out. I should have kept calling. That maybe this whole thing was a misunderstanding. I almost laughed, but something in me told me to stay calm. Maybe, just maybe, this was my chance to finally get the truth. So instead of kicking them out, I told them to sit down. And that's when the mask fell off. They admitted everything. Linda, my ex-wife, had been having an affair with Mark, my cousin, the entitled, arrogant jerk who I could never stand growing up. The one who always got away with everything because his mother died young and his father, my uncle, was the powerful patriarch of the family. Linda and Mark had been sneaking around during my marriage. And when she got pregnant, the family made a choice. A coward's choice. They chose to protect Mark, to protect my uncle, to preserve the family's reputation. So they helped Linda hide the affair, supported her when she filed for divorce, cut me off completely to make the situation cleaner. My uncle made it clear, if anyone in the family wanted to stay involved with the child, they had to abandon me. And they did. Every single one of them. The final blow? That child, the one Linda had while we were still married, was mine. My daughter. They never told me. Never gave me the chance to be a father. They erased me from her life before she even took her first breath. She's 20 now, and she believes Mark is her dad. As they sat there, telling me all this like it was just some long-lost confession, I couldn't feel my hands. My chest was tight. My ears were ringing. I was in a fog. It felt like I was watching a movie, someone else's tragedy, not mine. When they finished, they looked at me with soft eyes, like I was supposed to understand. Forgive. Move on. But I couldn't. Not then. Not after what they'd just told me. I stood up, told them to leave, and walked out of the lobby. My legs were shaking. My heart was thundering in my chest. But I didn't let them see it. They had survived 20 years without me. They could survive 20 more. And deep down, I knew this wasn't over. Not even close. They left that day, but they didn't stay gone. 3 days passed. I kept trying to throw myself into work, meetings, planning expansion, reviewing numbers, anything to keep my mind from spinning. But I couldn't focus. Not after what they told me. Every time I looked at a calendar, my thoughts turned to her. My daughter. A child I never knew existed. A life stolen from me. And all because my family decided I was expendable. They had 20 years to come clean. 20 years to do the right thing. But they waited until I was successful. Until my name was in magazines. Until I was someone worth being seen with. That told me everything I needed to know about their intentions. But they didn't stop there. They started showing up outside my building. Every morning. Just waiting. Not inside. Security wouldn't let them in after the first incident. But right outside the front doors. My mother, holding a small gift bag. My father, in that same stiff blazer he wore to every family event growing up. My sister, pacing nervously like she expected the earth to open beneath her. They sent emails. Long, emotional paragraphs filled with apologies, explanations, requests. They even used words like, "We were scared," and "we didn't have a choice." But they did. They always had a choice. They just chose him, Mark. The golden child. The family favorite. The man who looked me in the eye at Thanksgiving dinners while sleeping with my wife behind my back. Every word in their messages made me sick. My sister even dared to write that they were the reason I was successful, that if it weren't for them suggesting the name Maple and Ash, I wouldn't have built my empire. I laughed out loud reading that. A name is just a name. I built this life with blood, sweat, and friends. The ones who stood by me when my family threw me away like garbage. They weren't there when I was suicidal. They weren't there when I ate ramen for a month because my restaurant couldn't pay the bills. They weren't there when Emily and I spent sleepless nights with our newborn son. But now they wanted credit. They wanted to be a part of something they had nothing to do with. So I did what I had to do. I told security that if they ever tried to enter the building again, they were to be removed immediately. I blocked their email addresses. I even muted them on social media. I didn't want to see their names anymore. Didn't want to feel that twist in my gut every time I got another "please forgive us" message. But even with the noise blocked out, my mind wouldn't rest. Because no matter how much I hated them for what they'd done, I couldn't stop thinking about her, my daughter. She had lived her whole life thinking Mark was her father. 20 years. That's a lifetime of lies. And she didn't even know it. Emily and I had long talks about what to do. She was calm, patient, and surprisingly supportive, especially considering how messy this was. She told me, "You can't ignore this forever. She exists, and she deserves to know the truth, just like you did." She was right, but I was terrified. How do you approach someone whose entire reality was built on a lie? How do you show up out of nowhere and say, "Hi, I'm your real dad. Sorry I missed your whole life." We didn't even know where to start. But then I remembered something. During the lobby conversation, my parents had casually mentioned the college she was attending. I had brushed past it at the time, still reeling from everything else. But now, that detail stuck with me like a thorn. I asked my assistant, quietly, to look her up. Just her social media, nothing invasive. Within minutes, he found her Instagram profile. There she was. Sophie. Her name was Sophie. She looked so much like Linda that it hit me like a punch to the chest. But then I looked closer, and I saw me. The same eyes. The same stubborn set to the jaw. I stared at that profile photo for over an hour, frozen, hand trembling over my mouse, not knowing what to do next. Could I really message her? Would she believe me? Would she hate me? I didn't sleep that night. Or the next. I kept going back and forth, heart racing, stomach in knots. Part of me wanted to run, to forget I ever found her, and go back to pretending this chapter was closed. But the other part, the stronger part, knew I had to try. I didn't get a say in her first 20 years. But maybe, just maybe, I could be part of the next 20. And if I didn't try, I would regret it for the rest of my life. I stared at that message draft for 3 days. It sat in my Instagram DMs, unsent, just a few lines I kept rewriting, over and over, unsure of how to start a conversation that could shatter someone's world. How do you tell a 20-year-old woman that everything she believes about her life, her family, her father, is a lie? Emily stood by me the entire time. She read every version of the message I wrote, gently suggesting changes, or sometimes just holding my hand when I got too overwhelmed to type another word. She reminded me I wasn't trying to hurt Sophie. I was trying to give her the truth, something everyone else had denied her. Eventually, we settled on something simple, honest, not too heavy, but not sugar-coated. "Hi, Sophie. My name is David. I know this message might seem strange, and I promise I'm not here to cause trouble, but I believe I'm your biological father. I'd like to talk to you if you're willing. I understand this is a lot, and I'm open to answering any questions you have. I'll respect your space. I just wanted you to know the truth, and that I'm here if you want to talk." I sent it at 2:12 a.m. Then I turned off my phone, sat on the edge of my bed, and cried. Not from sadness. Not entirely, anyway. It was fear, guilt, relief, hope, all crashing into each other inside my chest. 20 years of being robbed of fatherhood had built up like pressure behind a dam, and now the first crack had formed. I didn't expect her to reply. Not quickly. Not ever. Maybe. But 2 weeks later, she did. Her message was short, measured, but every word cut deep. I talked to my mom. She admitted it. "You're my biological father." Just reading that, "You're my biological father," hit harder than I expected. I had imagined hearing it from her voice someday, not seeing it typed out in black and white. I don't know what to say. I've always believed Mark was my dad. This changes everything. I need time to process. But I want to meet you. I was stunned. I had braced myself for anger, denial, even hatred. But not this. Not openness. Sophie wanted to meet. She told me she couldn't afford to travel to us, and she wasn't speaking to her family right now. She didn't go into details, but she hinted that when she confronted Linda, the truth didn't come easily. Apparently, Linda tried to deny it at first, claimed I was trying to manipulate her. But Sophie had already seen the cracks in the story, and when she pressed harder, Linda finally confessed. She told her everything, or at least enough to confirm what I'd said. That same night, I booked 3 plane tickets. Emily, Alex, and I were going to meet her in person. I was terrified. What if seeing me in real life changed her mind? What if I said the wrong thing? What if she realized she didn't want to know me? But Emily calmed me the way she always does. If she's willing to meet you, that's already huge, she said. You don't have to fix 20 years in one weekend. Just show up. Be honest. Be kind. That's all she needs. We flew out on a Friday afternoon. The whole trip, I barely spoke. Alex, thankfully, was content playing games on his tablet, oblivious to the storm swirling around me. I couldn't eat, couldn't rest. My mind was stuck on the image of that Instagram profile, on the possibility of finally standing face to face with the daughter I never got to hold as a baby, never tucked in at night, never walked to school. The day we landed, my phone buzzed with a message from her. I'm nervous, but I'm ready. So was I. And yet, I wasn't. We met her the next day at a small cafe near her campus. She was sitting by the window, fidgeting with the sleeve of her sweater. I recognized her immediately. Those same eyes. That same stubborn jawline. She stood when she saw me. We didn't hug, not at first. It was too soon. But we looked at each other for a long, quiet moment. Then she smiled. I didn't think I'd feel anything, she said softly. But I do. And just like that, the wall began to crack. We spent hours talking. Her voice trembled at times. So did mine. She asked hard questions. I answered as best I could. We cried. We laughed. And when Alex leaned in and asked, "Are you my sister?" Sophie looked at him, smiled, and said, "I think I am." That night, I held Emily's hand and cried again. This time, it wasn't fear or guilt. It was hope. After 2 decades of silence and stolen time, I was finally beginning to know my daughter. And no one could take that away from me now. Meeting Sophie gave me something I thought I'd never have closure. Not the kind that ends a story, but the kind that lets you start a new one. She was everything I had hoped for: smart, thoughtful, guarded, but open to healing. Our first meeting was raw, emotional, and real. She bonded with Emily, laughed with Alex, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like something broken inside of me had finally begun to mend. But life doesn't hand you peace without testing how badly you want to keep it. Word got out fast. I don't know if Sophie told someone she trusted, or if my family had been watching our every move, but within days of that cafe meeting, the vultures circled again. It started with a call from my assistant. "David," he said hesitantly, "your parents have been calling. A lot. And your uncle just left a message asking for a private family conversation." There it was. The panic. The moment they realized their 20-year lie was unraveling and they were losing control. Then came the emails. My father wrote a novel's worth of apologies, shifting blame, begging me to clarify that they hadn't told me about Sophie. He claimed it was all my uncle's doing, that he'd threatened to cut them off, disown them from the family business, ruin everything if they dared tell me the truth. As if that made it better. As if cowardice was somehow more noble than betrayal. My uncle, meanwhile, stayed true to character, cold, calculating, furious. He sent a single message, short and sharp. "You've made a mistake digging up the past. This affects more people than you think." I didn't respond. Because I didn't care. Let them be afraid. Let them squirm. For 20 years, they slept well knowing they'd cut me out of my own daughter's life. They watched her grow up calling Mark Dad, while I mourned a marriage I never understood, cursed the loneliness I didn't deserve. Now, they were losing grip on the fantasy they built, and watching the truth expose their rot. Emily stood by me, calm and unshaken, even as the messages flooded in. My parents tried to guilt-trip me. My sister begged for a second chance. My uncle demanded silence. Even Mark reached out. Yes, Mark. He had the audacity to text me, saying I was confusing Sophie and damaging the family dynamic. He called me selfish for contacting my own daughter. I nearly threw my phone across the room, but I didn't respond to any of them. I didn't need to, because Sophie had already made her choice. She called me 2 nights after our meeting. Her voice cracked, but she sounded stronger than I expected. "They're freaking out," she said. "My mom, Mark, my grandparents. Everyone's acting like I did something wrong by meeting you." I told her the truth. You didn't. You did what they were too scared to do, ask questions. She paused. Then she said something I'll never forget. I always felt like something was missing, like my life didn't quite add up. Now I know why. She didn't hate her mother. She didn't even hate Mark. But she was hurt, deeply, and she needed time away from them to process everything. She told me she didn't plan to cut them off forever, but she was setting boundaries. For now, she wanted to get to know me. I promised to take things slow. No pressure. No expectations. Just time, something we'd both lost so much of. That weekend, we invited her over for dinner. It was surreal watching her sit across from Alex at the table, helping him cut his steak, laughing at his silly jokes. She was so natural with him, like some part of her recognized the connection, even if it had only just begun. After dinner, we sat in the living room. Sophie turned to me and said, "You know what's weird? My mom always told me your family was complicated, but they were always around. Grandma, Grandpa, and Rachel. They all doted on me. Now I know why. I just thought they were being nice." My heart sank. They had always known who she was. And instead of being honest, they played pretend, showered her with affection while hiding the truth about who I was. They didn't just steal her from me. They wrapped her in a world of lies and called it love. But that world was cracking now. And for the first time, I was inside it. Later that night, as Emily tucked Alex into bed and Sophie and I cleaned up the dishes, she turned to me and asked, "Do you ever feel like you were replaced?" I didn't hesitate. "Every day." She nodded, quietly. Then, almost in a whisper, she said, "Me too." We didn't need to say more. Because in that moment, we both understood something unspoken. While the past was stolen from us, the future was ours to reclaim. And I intended to make the most of every second. I thought things would calm down after that first dinner with Sophie. I thought, naively, that maybe we had turned a corner. That we could begin something resembling a normal relationship. A second chance, even if it was late. But the past doesn't let go so easily, especially when it's wrapped in decades of silence and lies. A few days after Sophie visited, she called me again. Her voice was different this time, more distant. Not cold, but uncertain. "There's something I need to tell you," she said. "It's about your parents, my grandparents." I tensed. I already knew that anything involving them wouldn't be good. Sophie hesitated, then said, "They stayed in touch with me. All these years." At first, I didn't understand. "You mean recently?" I asked. "No," she replied softly. "My whole life." I sat there, stunned. She continued explaining how my parents had been part of her world since she was a child. They came to birthdays, sent her Christmas presents, showed up at her dance recitals and school plays. She thought they were Linda's relatives, her dad's side of the family. She didn't know they were my parents, her real grandparents. They had never told her the truth. Not once. And that nearly broke me. They had maintained a relationship with her in secret, behind my back. They were there for her first steps, her milestones, her childhood joys, all while pretending I didn't exist. I had spent years grieving a family that had chosen to erase me, and yet they remained part of her life, carefully preserving their image while destroying mine. They knew she was mine, and they still looked me in the eyes 20 years ago and turned their backs. I felt like I couldn't breathe. I thanked Sophie for telling me, but inside, I was unraveling. The betrayal ran deeper than I'd thought possible. It wasn't just what they didn't tell me. It was the fact that they had lived in the lie, nurtured it, protected it, and benefited from it. They had stolen a daughter from me and still kept her close. I didn't sleep that night. Emily tried to talk to me, but I was lost in my own mind, pacing the hallway like a man haunted by ghosts. I replayed every interaction I'd ever had with my parents, every unanswered call, every shut door, and now I saw it differently. I saw it through the eyes of a man who'd been surgically cut out of his own bloodline. The next morning, they called again. They had heard that Sophie and I were in contact, and that we'd met. Of course they had. Their panic showed in every message. "We need to talk. You're being unfair." We were trying to protect everyone. Protect who, exactly? Certainly not me. They wanted a meeting. A proper sit-down. Family to family, my father wrote. I deleted the email. But Sophie, she wasn't done asking questions. She started digging into the past on her own. Old family photos. Letters. Conversations with Linda, who was still trying to spin the narrative, but crumbling under the pressure. Sophie was relentless. She told me it felt like her entire life was a puzzle someone had scrambled, and now she was trying to piece it back together. Then she said something that hit me harder than I expected. "I want to know why no one ever thought I deserved the truth." I didn't have an answer. Because I'd been asking myself the same thing for 2 decades. In the days that followed, Sophie began pulling away from her mother and Mark. Not out of spite, but because she needed space. Clarity. She told me she'd never see them the same way again. She didn't plan to cut them off completely, at least not yet, but things would never go back to how they were. And then, quietly, she asked, "Can I come visit again?" "Anytime," I said. "This is your home too, if you want it to be." So she did. This time, she stayed for the weekend. She helped Emily cook dinner, played board games with Alex. We even watched an old animated movie she loved as a kid, the kind I never got to share with her the first time around. When she went to bed that night, she hugged me. It wasn't long. It wasn't dramatic, but it was real. I stood in the hallway afterward, heart pounding, eyes stinging, because I knew what that hug meant. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But it was acknowledgement. A quiet, powerful message. I see you. I know you're my father. And I'm willing to let you in. After 20 years of absence, that meant more than I could ever explain. But I also knew one thing for sure. This story wasn't done. Not by a long shot. If you had told me a year ago that I'd be sitting at the dinner table with my wife, my son, and the daughter I never knew I had, laughing, sharing stories, passing mashed potatoes like a normal family, I would have laughed in your face. But there we were. Sophie had come to visit again, and this time, it felt different. Less guarded, less uncertain. There was a kind of warmth building between us, not forced or fabricated, but natural, real. And still, behind the smiles, I knew we were all carrying something heavy. A weight none of us knew quite how to name. That weekend, Sophie pulled me aside after Alex went to bed. We were in the backyard, the cool night air brushing past us, the soft hum of crickets filling the silence. "I talked to them," she said. She didn't have to say who. I knew. Linda and Mark. "What did they say?" I asked, my voice tighter than I intended. "They're angry, hurt, confused," she replied. "But mostly afraid. I think they know they've lost control, and they don't know how to deal with that." I nodded. "They're good at hiding behind lies." Sophie looked at me then, really looked at me. "Do you think I'm like them?" That question cut deeper than anything else ever had. I stepped closer, my voice shaking. "You are nothing like them, Sophie. You asked for the truth. You faced it. That takes courage. You didn't choose the lie. You survived it." Her eyes welled up, but she blinked it away. "I just don't know who I am anymore." I understood that better than she knew. For 20 years, I thought I was a divorced man abandoned by his family for no reason. That identity sank into my bones. But now I knew the truth, and I had to rebuild who I was from the ground up. So was she. We were two people standing in the ruins of a story someone else wrote for us. Later that night, after she went to bed, I sat with Emily in the living room. She poured me a glass of wine, curled up beside me, and rested her head on my shoulder. "She's starting to trust you," she whispered. "I know," I replied, "and I'm terrified I'll mess it up." "You won't. Just keep showing up." Emily always knew how to anchor me, even in this storm. The next morning, I received an email. It was long, desperate, and laced with manipulation. It was from my parents. They had heard, again, somehow, that Sophie was staying with us. And now, they wanted one last chance to explain everything. They begged to meet, claimed they were ready to tell me the whole truth, as if there was anything left to reveal. They said they missed their grandson, too, Alex. That stung more than I care to admit. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then, without replying, I walked outside. Sophie was sitting on the porch swing, coffee in hand. I sat beside her. "They reached out again," I said. She didn't ask who. "What are you going to do?" she asked quietly. "I don't know." And that was the honest truth. A part of me wanted to face them, tear into them with all the rage I'd bottled up over the years. Another part wanted to block them forever and never look back. But a small, bitter part of me wondered, what if I need closure? Real closure. Emily supported whatever I chose. She said as long as it didn't bring more pain into the house, she'd stand by it. So I made a decision. A week later, I invited them over. Not out of forgiveness, but because I needed to look them in the eye and tell them exactly what they'd done. No shouting, no violence, just truth, raw, cold, and undeniable. They showed up nervous, dressed too formally, eyes red like they hadn't slept in days. "I see you've finally decided to acknowledge your granddaughter," I said flatly. My mother opened her mouth to speak, but I stopped her. "No, you don't get to lead this. You led for 20 years. Look where that got us. And then I let it all out. Everything. The pain of being abandoned. The years of silence. The lies they told Sophie. The role they played in stealing fatherhood from me. I laid it all bare, and for once, they didn't interrupt. When I finished, my father said, "We thought we were protecting the family." I looked him in the eye and replied, "You destroyed it." And then I asked them to leave. No hugs. No promises. No second chances. They left in silence. Sophie stood beside me the whole time. We didn't speak after the door closed. We didn't need to. That night, as we all sat around the dinner table, Emily, Alex, Sophie, and me, I realized something important. This wasn't the end of the story. This was the beginning. The broken pieces were still sharp, still dangerous. But we were choosing to build something new from them, something honest, something real. And for the first time in 2 decades, I was no longer a man grieving what I'd lost. I was a father, finally finding what had been stolen. And this time, I wouldn't let it go. Looking back on everything, every betrayal, every loss, every quiet victory, I've come to realize that life doesn't always give you justice. Sometimes, it gives you truth. And truth, no matter how painful, is a gift. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Family is not defined by blood alone. It's defined by love, honesty, and the courage to stand by each other when things fall apart. The people who chose to walk with me, Emily, Alex, and now Sophie, they are my family. To those of you listening, especially if you're older like me, let me say this. Don't wait for time to fix what only truth and action can. Speak up. Ask the hard questions. Rebuild, even if it's messy. We may carry regrets, but we still have time to write a better ending. You're never too old to make peace with the past. You're never too broken to open a new door. And most importantly, you are still needed. By someone. Somewhere. Just as I was needed by a daughter I never knew I had, and who changed everything when she looked me in the eye and said, "I'm glad you found me."